Can you imagine waking up one day only to find that everything you believed in disappears in a single moment? He once thought his family was perfect until he uncovered the most terrifying betrayal he never saw coming. Dive into the dark secrets behind the perfect facade and discover if he can ever love again after everything falls apart. This story is one you won't see coming. Before continuing the story, tell me which city you are watching from. I want to know how far this video has come. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so I can send you exciting stories like this every day. My ex-wife was not a good person. I needed to protect my daughter's safety. I got 100% custody, and the mom skipped out by moving from Texas to a European country. Despite the trauma to myself and my daughter, who was 4 years old at the time, I fought to keep some sort of connection between the two. I set up virtual dates either by phone or video when that became more accessible. She hasn't always been present for our daughter, but it wasn't like her two other sons from two previous relationships where there has been zero contact for 12 and 16 years respectively. Needless to say, I was happy to be moving on with my life. It took me about 3 years, but I found what I felt was a tremendous woman who could potentially fill in as a mother to my daughter. This woman soon became my wife 2 years later. I tend to find really good things in people despite their flaws. I have so many flaws. Who am I to judge? I want someone who can see the good things about me and not sweat the small stuff. I saw who my wife was to her core and fell in love with her. She's the most hardworking person I've ever met. Things didn't start off very well in those stepmother-daughter arena, because at this point, my daughter's biological mother was pulling away. She stopped paying child support and stopped showing up for some virtual dates. I was quickly placed in the middle between a 7-year-old little girl who didn't understand why her real mom wasn't around and a woman I was falling in love with. The next 3 years was incredibly intense, and I did not handle the stress of that very well, as my soon wife told me all the things I did wrong on raising my daughter all by myself. I did the best I could, y'all, over the next couple of years in this new relationship. My father lost his wife to lung cancer, my stepmother, who was like a mother to me, and my father, who got diagnosed with emphysema. He lost his house and I had him move in with me. So at this point, it's me, my new wife, our newborn baby son that we just had, and my daughter from a previous marriage. I handle my stress in 2 ways. I either overeat because I grew up incredibly poor and never had any food, or I get very loud and angry and yell. This is my biggest struggle, and I work on it every single day. There have been days where I was angry all the time because not only was I placed in the middle between my new wife and daughter, but my wife and father, who isn't very easy to live with. The larger I grew in weight gain, the more I grew anger from the overwhelming stress. It got to a point where I yelled at my preteen daughter a lot. I got in her face, I said hurtful things, and I scared her. Unintentionally, because I couldn't take the middleman stress my wife placed me in and the attitude I was receiving from my child. I even temporarily kicked my father out of the house for a year, who wound up being homeless and living out of his car. I was afraid every single day that I'd find him dead in his car because he had no place to go and slept in the parking lot to our apartment in the winter. More recently, things have been rocky with my wife for years at this point. We now have a 2-year-old son and found out she was pregnant with our youngest son. We started seeing a marriage counselor and have been going to therapy solo as well, just before Christmas of 2019. We were under a great deal of stress. Things were still bad between her and I. We barely had sex for the last 3 years, maybe 30 times in that time period, despite the stress. I felt the therapy was helping my anger be well managed, but it didn't completely disappear. Around this time, our youngest son contracted the flu and couldn't stop throwing up. We had to hospitalize him, and he wasn't discharged until nearly midnight on Christmas Eve and day. To top it off, my wife got the flu, and so did I, while sleeping on a tiny, uncomfortable hospital couch. My mother-in-law was also in town. Oh, I absolutely loathed, and she got sick. Tensions were high, and despite everything going on, my wife found ways to push every button that I had when we got home. She kept telling me that she couldn't rely on me to take care of our son, despite me telling her to go home and rest, since she was sick, as I continued to sleep in the hospital next to our little boy who had just turned 2. I confronted her about her accusations, and she showed no remorse for it and continued to push those buttons. I had a car seat next to my feet where I was standing, and I picked it up and threw it on the opposite side of the house in frustration. away from my wife. I had no idea. But my mother-in-law was laying on the couch by where it landed, and despite how I felt about her, I felt horrible for what I did. I then had to put up with my mother-in-law telling me that I needed to be on medication. I was on medication and act as if I was the only one at fault here. I wasn't privately. I got my wife to admit her actions that led to the argument. But when it came to her mother, she refused to stand up for me, as the mother-in-law berated me. And with my mother-in-law, it was a case of the pot calling the kettle black to the extreme. The whole situation was really bad. But this incident was a turning point for my anger for the last 7 months. My anger has been mostly controlled. I was truly becoming a strong father figure and loving husband. I was able to fully open up to my therapist about my past that I had repressed and discovered that I had an entire childhood of sexual and physical abuse. I've been sodomized by my family member. I was raped by kids down the street from my grandparents' house, and I was molested by a guy at a motel where we lived. I also recalled that I was physically abused by a babysitter for a while, and I was even abused by my mother. This is why I've been so angry, and I was making a huge breakthrough in my life. I was so proud to share my progress in self-discoveries with my wife. My wife and I have been working from home during the quarantine, and as you can imagine, the tensions have been high for the last couple of months or so. She's been spending a lot of time away from the house, anywhere from up to 4 to 5 days in a week. She's either going to work out with our daycare provider, who she is friends with, or going out with coworkers. I felt that the space between us was a good thing. Since we've been cooped up for so long, I felt my marriage was getting back on track. We even started to have a little more sex after some heart-to-heart talks about how my weight and her weight had impacted the pleasure for her. It really all made sense because her whole life, she's never been a very sexual person due to her own sexual traumas. I was feeling so good that I was even writing a self-help article to share my discoveries with others, so I could help anyone who needed it over the last couple of weeks. I started to grow suspicious of my wife's outings. A lot of things didn't add up. She started tucking her phone away when I walked by her, which she never did, and the conversations between us just felt different. A week before our anniversary, she had plans to go eat dinner with a coworker. We both knew she kissed me goodnight. It told me that she loved me. It wasn't a quick peck or someone you're obligated to kiss. There was love in there, or so I thought. Her dinner ran late and it turned into a text message of her telling me she was going to play pool and that she loved me while sharing some kissy emoji, which was completely out of character for her using these emojis. I knew something was wrong. It now turned to 12:30 a.m. when she should have been home around 9 or 10 p.m. and I still hadn't heard from her. I had put both our sons to bed and I sat up waiting for her, extremely concerned because she did not return any of my texts. I was able to log into her Google account and pin her device to see if she was in a location that would raise concerns like being in an accident or broken down. She was in a town 40 miles away from our house, far from where she said she was supposed to be. I got in my car and drove over there to see if I could find her car. I arrived at 1 a.m. and was able to locate her car parked in front of a house I did not recognize. It was around this time that my daughter texted me asking where I was. I don't know what it was about the conversation with her, but I felt she knew more than what she was saying. I kept telling her I was looking for her mother because I was worried and it wasn't like her to be gone so long. My daughter kept trying to convince me that she was all right, and she's probably just hanging out at a friend's house. The more we talked, the more I grew suspicious that my daughter was holding back. Because of this, I pretended to be more panicked than I really was. At the moment, I told her I was going to call the cops because I was afraid that maybe she was kidnapped or got into an accident or something, even though I was standing behind her vehicle. I paced behind my wife's car for roughly an hour, and it was now 2 a.m. She still hadn't come out. Her car used to have an issue where if you opened the car door, the car alarm would go off. I opened the door and I remembered that we had got that fixed. No alarm went off. My hope was she would come out and I wouldn't have to knock on a stranger's door to see if my wife was there. I desperately didn't want to go to anyone's house. The light in the car came on and I could see her youth baseball bat. She had protection sitting upright. At this point, I was still unsure if she was cheating on me. I was pretty sure she was, but there was a part of me that was holding out. Hope. I grabbed the bat and paced back and forth for another hour while my daughter was unusually concerned about why I was out looking for her. It felt like she was protecting her and kept telling me that I was overreacting. The more she told me I was overreacting, the more I acted panicked. She eventually told me her mother was out with a guy and gave me his address, the address that I was at Guy's my wife told our daughter in advance. She was spending time with a guy she met on a dating app and they both kept it from me. My heart instantly sank and I walked up to the door. My heart tried to convince me that they were just friends. I told her that she doesn't get dressed up the way she did to go drinking with a guy that she just wants to be friends with. While I was pacing, I could see a half-naked man walking back and forth. I decided to bring the bat with me for my protection. I had no idea what I was about to walk into, and I was concerned for my family. That's when this young man, probably late 20s, answered the door. I told him my wife was in the house and I needed to get her. He intentionally played stupid and acted confused. He immediately saw the bat and was concerned for his safety. I know the optics are bad. I explained to him that I was concerned and unsure of what was going on and that it wasn't for me to be aggressive. It was for protection. He believed me. It was at this point, he said that maybe she's in his roommate's room. He told me that I didn't need the bat because he was very scrawny, but I refused to let go of it. He let me in the house and pointed to his roommate's bedroom. I tried to open the door, but it was locked. My heart sank even more. I was lost, confused, and scared. I turned around and looked at the roommate, and he knew what was going through my head. Which is funny because I had no idea what was going on through my head. He said, "Don't do it, man," and it triggered something in me. I had so much instant adrenaline as I kicked the door open and saw my wife lying naked in bed with a naked man for a split second. It didn't feel like reality. My anger came back, but not like it had in the past. I'm afraid I was yelling, asking why the hell she was there at this point. She had the audacity to yell at me and ask why I was there. The guy was a complete douchebag. He got up holding his dick and was giving a lot of smirks and making snide comments. It took everything inside of me not to react violently. I'm not a physically violent person, so it wasn't in me to do so, but I gripped the bat tightly as he walked out of the room. My wife continued to yell at me and even demanded that I leave the house so she could get dressed. I couldn't fathom how this conversation was playing out, but I reluctantly walked outside so I could get my wife out of the house. She's stubborn, and I knew she wouldn't leave if I didn't step outside. I stood outside that front door waiting, and I saw the guy walk into his garage because there's a house window from the patio to the garage. Then I watched my wife walk in there fully clothed. She hugged him and apologized to him for my actions. She had no idea I could see. My blood started to boil as I yelled at her for what she was doing. We didn't have much of a conversation outside, and I struggled to keep from vomiting all over the street outside of his house. I felt deathly ill, and my wife didn't even care about my feelings. This is the mother of my 3 children. This is the woman that I had promised to spend the rest of my life with. This is the woman that I am deeply in love with, and she was treating me with a coldness that I've never experienced from her. For I didn't see the woman who kissed me goodbye and told me she loved me. I saw hate. I saw disgust. I'm really good at reading people, and I'm especially good at reading my wife and daughter, but I did not see any of this. We drove home in separate cars, and my daughter stopped responding to me. She ran away because of my past anger issues. She has developed a serious fear of me. It's 3 a.m. and she's at a local park hiding until my wife gets home. It was the longest 40-minute drive of my life. I'm devastated, crying, confused, and angry. I get home and I'm desperately trying to find my child because I'm worried about her safety. This is when my wife gets home and my daughter comes out of the shadows. I tried to talk to my wife in a respectful and calm manner, but she wasn't having it. She was tired, and this was a work night. She had to be online for work in 2 hours. It was at this point that my daughter told me that she wanted to move in with my wife and that she wanted nothing to do with me anymore. She told me she'd only visit me out of obligation. This was the second dagger in my heart. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I didn't eat anything for 7 days and lost 17 pounds. The very smell of food made me nauseous. I got my wife to talk a little bit, and she told me her plan was to legally adopt my daughter with the intention of being a family and then divorce me and take her from me. I later found out that my daughter was texting my wife and telling her she was trying to record my phone conversations with her to use against me in a court of law. The conversation was a phone conversation I had with her while I was finding my wife in bed with another man, and had to wait outside his house while she got dressed. I was being conspired against. I felt betrayed. The last week and a half have been incredibly challenging. I drove to my hometown to be with my 3 kids and family through this tough time, and I learned a lot from my daughter. I learned that my wife had been bad-mouthing me to her for a while now. They had been making fun of my body issues and sharing text conversations. She was having with a guy she was sleeping with. They both kept referring to me as insane and crazy, like I was at fault here. I can't imagine how someone can drag a child into a very adult situation. As intelligent and mature as my daughter is, she's still a little girl. She doesn't understand any of this, and she's only getting one side of everything. My wife and daughter have really bonded because my wife has been spending our money on things like Starbucks, so they could spend time together. It wasn't about the money, but it was about the quality time spent together. Whenever I wanted to spend money, I was always told we were broke. My wife obviously controlled the finances. I felt broke for 7 years now, but somehow she was always able to buy things on Amazon. My daughter absolutely has the right to be upset with me for the things I put her through, but I feel it has been escalated by a shared experience with my wife while she badmouthed me. If my daughter was at a 4 out of 10 on an unhappy scale with me, the conversations with my wife bumped her up to a 10. My daughter even told me she encouraged my wife to seek a male companionship. My anger has been bad throughout her life, and I'll pay for that for the rest of my life, but it hasn't been anything that hasn't warranted the treatment I've been receiving. If you ask anyone who knows me, they will tell you how much I love my children and how I would do anything for them. Now, my wife and daughter are wanting to put her in our divorce decree, her non-biological daughter in our divorce decree. They want to make it legal. I'm so lost, confused, angry, lonely, hurt, and flabbergasted. I don't know how the story will be received here. I'm sure there will be some who rail on me about my anger and my actions, and those who are just as shocked as I am. I had hoped I would feel better after I typed this out, but I don't. I'm an absolute mess, and the person I need the most to help me get through this hates me, and I have no friends in this state that I can turn to. This hurts. Edit. We're amicably getting a divorce. I've had to swallow my pride and shove down my pain for the betterment of my children. If it makes her hurt like I'm hurting, it only hurts my children. And that's not acceptable. Update. I had a really tough day. I had a really tough day on Monday for my own therapy. I'm going to be completely vulnerable as I open myself up to the world. For the most part, and in any other context, none of these things should have and would have bothered me. But given recent events, I just couldn't breathe. I couldn't think straight. I couldn't remove images from my head. I was emotional and I was scared. It was really important for me to distance myself and my finances from my soon-to-be ex-wife. She always gave me the sense that I couldn't handle finances on my own because she directly told me so and told me that I should leave my paychecks in her account until we officially separated. I couldn't do it. I needed to separate everything ASAP. I can handle my finances as I'm an adult and a high-functioning business professional. Unfortunately, I am human and I do make mistakes, and given what's going on, I am more likely to make mistakes. I provided the wrong account number to my direct deposits. They require what is called an amaker number, which is essentially a digital barcode. I provided my actual account number, which rejected all of my money. I'm now waiting on paper checks, and my house payment is late. It's early Monday. I had a doctor's appointment for an unrelenting reason for depression, but I felt I should write depression down as a secondary reason for being at my appointment. My doctor is amazing. She listened to me. She was compassionate and empathetic. She helped me, but she was concerned that I had these images flashing in my mind of self-harm. I don't know where these images came from or why they were all of a sudden appearing now. I don't think there was any will or desire behind these images, just suggestions placed in my mind's eye. Every time I closed my eyes or blinked, I would never hurt myself. Life is never so bad for me to take my own life or hurt myself or those that I care for around me. I firmly believe that, but the images scared me. They began as images of me driving in my car off a local dam because I had been driving. I decided to visit an old Little League baseball field. I grew up. I parked in the parking lot trying to figure out why I never got paid. Every direct deposit I had coming in was rejected. There were 3 of them. I drove to my bank at 9 a.m. due to COVID, They didn't open until 10 a.m. I had music playing, and every time I closed my eyes, the images became more real. They shifted from driving my car off the damn road to grabbing razor blades from my drawer at home. The phrase "up the tracks, not across the tracks" was playing in my head in the style of a 1950s showroom melody. I had already figured out what was wrong with my account. So I had no reason to go into the bank. But I couldn't go home. I couldn't drive. Both images scared me enough that I worried about both. So I called my therapist's office to ask for someone I could speak with. God bless the young girl who answered the phone, because she was not prepared to deal with what she was about to get into. I explained my desperation of needing to talk to someone. She opened my chart and informed me that my therapist is on vacation for the next week. I again emphasized the importance of talking to someone. She suggested that she could cancel all my appointments with my therapist and assign me a new one. No, that's not going to work. I just need to talk. She wasn't sure what to do. She fumbled around for a minute trying to figure something out. There was a moment of awkward silence, and click, she hung up on me in the moment. It felt like she had given up on me when in actuality, she probably just screwed up. I called back and got a different girl. She too had no solution for me. I did ask to speak to a manager, but I'm fairly certain they're all working from home now, and getting a manager on the phone right away wasn't feasible. She promised to have a manager call me. I told her about my images, and she was sincerely concerned, but she couldn't help me. I sat in the parking lot a while longer, scared of what to do next. I received a call from my therapist's office after a few minutes, and the girl, Morgan, knew just what to do. She talked to me. She wasn't a therapist, but she cared. She took action. She asked if I was home, and I said no, but she had already called the police to do a wellness check on me. I told her I was heading home, that I needed to get home by 11 to return my rental with my wife's sidebar. I'm driving a rental car. After finding out my wife's cheating, I was asked by my family to come home to Vegas so they could care for me. They suggested I bring my daughter. My wife suggested that I bring my 2 boys as well. A day before I was leaving, my car broke down. I had 2 bad engine mounts, a bad water pump, a broken fuse box, and bad spark plugs. I still really needed to get to Vegas. So I called my insurance USA since I'm a veteran. The guy, who was also a Marine, was very helpful and told me that my insurance would cover the rental for mechanical reasons. After I got to Vegas, I was told that they wouldn't cover the rental, but had already paid $600 to $200 deposit in sidebar. The girl was so sweet and listened to me that I started to cry while driving. In certain cases where I was explaining my story, I would start to sob. She stayed on the phone the whole time I told her I was home. I told her I walked into the house, I was on speakerphone, and my wife could hear parts of the conversation. I hung up after thanking her and placed my head in my hand and gently sobbed. My wife isn't a monster. What she did to me was horrific, and she knows it, but she's not a monster. She had empathy, compassion, and love for me. She just doesn't know how to show it. She always feels robotic, but that's due to her own childhood and life struggles. She could tell I was not okay and walked over to me. She asked if I wanted to hold her. I nodded my head, yes, in my hands, and refused to make eye contact. I didn't want her to actually see the tears. I buried my head into her chest, gripped tight around her back, and bawled. She rubbed my back and told me to breathe. I cried harder. I appreciated her willingness to console me, but it felt robotic. It didn't fill the void in my chest where my heart used to be. It wasn't helping. Then there was a loud knock on the door. She asked what that was, and I said it was the police. She was confused. She asked why they were there, and I said they were there for me. She was worried. She went to answer the door, and they explained in a little more detail why they were there. The 2 officers came into my bedroom. They were incredible. The female officer that was doing most of the talking instantly related to my daughter and my story. Her father committed suicide in prison. She talked about the void she had in her heart because of it. The male officer saw my U.S. Marine Corps leg tattoo. He was a Marine. He started talking to me like a Marine. It helped, but they were dispatched to someone else, and the man shook my hand and the woman hugged me. They cared and it felt good, but they were gone, and my robotic wife sat down at her computer to go back to work as if nothing happened. I couldn't be there anymore. I said that over and over quietly to myself, but loud enough for my wife to hear it. I can't be here. I can't be here. Can't be. I got in my car and my wife didn't chase after me. I was crushed. I got down the street and she called. I couldn't answer. She texted that if you don't answer, I'm calling the cops to come find you. I didn't respond. She called again 2 more times and I couldn't answer. She continued to text me without a response. Okay, I'm calling them 12:18 p.m. She called me again at 12:29 p.m. They are going to call you 12:32 p.m. The female officer I spoke to before called me 6 times between 12:32 and 12:36. I couldn't answer. She even texted me. I was scared of these images in my head, and I did want to be somewhere safe. I drove to the police station and parked in the parking lot. I threw on some sad music and opened up Facebook and scrolled through 7 years of love and our family growth. I watched as my family turned from just me and my daughter into a family of 3, then into a family of 4, and finally into a family of 5. I absolutely love my family, but I couldn't answer the phone. Another officer kept calling from a blocked number. I did answer, but I wasn't very forthcoming with what was going on, so I eventually hung up on him. I needed to get away. My family and I took our first vacation up to the Pacific Northwest last August into Vancouver, Canada. I got on the freeway and started to drive that way, but couldn't do it. I turned around and started to head toward another city. That was meaningful for my wife and I. I couldn't do it either. While driving, I had a flash of a Catholic church in my head. I'm not religious, but I knew there would be someone I could talk to. I needed to talk to someone who wasn't a friend, who wasn't a relative. I sat in the pew of this beautiful church. I had a moment just for me. It was peaceful and relaxing. It quieted the images in my head while I sat there. I could breathe a little better. Eventually, I started to look around and no one was coming to check on me. It wasn't like you see in the movies. I can't help you if you don't talk to me. I went to the administration office and asked for a priest or a confession booth or something. The nice woman said that there was only one priest today and he was out due to an emergency. She said there would be 2 priests tomorrow and asked if I wanted to make an appointment. I politely said no and walked away. It was almost 2:45 p.m. and I knew my wife had an appointment for the dentist at 3 p.m. I got on the freeway and decided to head to that city I mentioned before at this point. My family had been notified about my absence and started to call me in text pleading for me to answer. I couldn't. I got into the slow lane because I couldn't continue to drive. Miraculously, my wife drove right by me on the freeway on the way to her appointment. I needed to be close to her, so I followed her. I parked in the parking lot of the dentist office. I needed to see how worried she was. I needed her to feel the same level of anxiety that I felt the night I couldn't find her while she was cheating, but it didn't feel right. I couldn't sit there and stare at her car from the corner of the parking lot, so I drove back to the church. I sat on the same spot again in the pew and the priest showed up. He pulled me into a room to talk and I shared with him my story. At this point, my entire family is freaking out, but I had to talk to this priest. I told him everything. He was also very compassionate. He explained to me that none of this was my fault, that I don't need to think about self-harm. Please answer your phone or come talk to me at 24 p.m. Why are you ignoring me for 36 p.m.? I'm getting to the end of my story with the priest and he's giving really good life advice and I look at my phone again. That's sitting on my lap. The wife texted me again. We need to take the rental back. This is what you're concerned with now. The priest saw me breaking down and said he couldn't let me leave. He was mandated to call the police. We agreed he could call them. They showed up and I shared my story with the 2 officers. The one male officer doing all the talking was also 29 years old, like the female officer earlier in the day, but this time he was able to relate to me. He was also Marine and he had gone through almost identically the things I'm going through. I got these cops for a reason. Before they arrived, I finally called my wife and let her know that I was okay. I told her I was going away for a while and she needed to come pick up the rental. She grabbed a mutual friend and came up. She told all of my family that I was all right. The moment I saw her in the same car as our friend, I broke down. She stepped out of the car and I could not face her physically. I physically could not have my chest facing her direction. I couldn't have her see me like this. Both our friend and my wife stood in the parking lot and the cops stopped them from walking up to me as I slid my body behind the pillar and wept. The deputy asked if it would be okay if my friend came over to me and I nodded yes. The closer she came, the harder I cried. She grabbed me and I broke down. She held me up kissed me on the cheek, and let me sob. I could feel the warmth, love, and concern from her. My friend asked if I wanted my wife to come over. I wanted my wife to come over more than anything. I've absolutely killed myself to be a better person for her, and I wanted her in my life. I wanted to fix all the things I've done wrong, and I can't. It's over. I nodded that I wanted to come over, but it still struggled with facing her. I felt like a toddler who refuses to face their parent when they're in trouble. The closer she got, and the more she tried to stand in front of me, the more I cried and the more I turned my body away. The deputies asked if we wanted to go into a room together, and they would be there with us. They were incredibly protective of me. My friend walked up to my wife and angrily told her not to talk to me and just hold me. We went into a nearby room, and I grabbed her and held her and cried some more. I couldn't control this. I've never cried in my life. I'm sensitive and emotionally open, but I'm not a crier, and I was embarrassed with it all. We said our goodbyes, and I handed her the rental keys. The police put me in the back of their car and drove me to the hospital to speak to a crisis worker. I got some food, which was surprisingly good for a hospital. The nurses were incredible. They liked my mask and asked me about it. I bought it off Amazon. They listened to parts of my story, and we made fun of a drunk guy on a gurney as he belted out 2 tickets to paradise. I felt better. I had a long conversation with a crisis worker, and we agreed to create a safety plan. We identified my triggers and created responses that I could do to combat those tough moments. We agreed that I could leave since I was there voluntarily. So I've been staying with my friends since Monday night and away from my wife. I don't know why. I was having such a tough day. I think it had a lot to do with everything bad happening financially and watching my wife quickly move on with her life. She's still talking to the dude. She cheated because she likes him, because he's the opposite of me. She was asking our neighbors on social media for TVs and printers for parts for this new guy to use for projects. It crushed me for some reason. It made the last 7 years feel like they never mattered. I was overwhelmed with it all. I really am doing better. I got some medication to help me sleep. It's blocking out the bad images when I close my eyes at night, because every time I close my eyes, I see my wife's naked body lying next to a naked man. I see her kiss me goodbye the night she left to cheat. I hear her tell me she loves me as she left to cheat. I see the text telling me she was going to go play pool with a girlfriend that we both knew. I saw the disgust, anger, and hatred in her body when I caught her cheating. I needed to not feel her anger and hatred. I needed her to feel what I felt. The updated story of a wife cheating and life after. Hey folks, it's been over a year now since I posted an update and didn't think that I would post an update because honestly, who cares about my life, right? I didn't think my story was any different than any other story people have shared. However, I've noticed that I'm still getting a lot of messages from people giving me their condolences and asking for updates. Hell, apparently my story even got turned into a YouTube video, which was weird. What I found very interesting through all of these comments I've received on Reddit and YouTube as a purveyor of social media news is that so many different people can have different reactions and thoughts. Not only about me and my soon-to-be ex-wife, but even my daughter. Some of the comments were even a bit extreme. We all read so many stories every day about so many different events. And I've always wondered what the reality in those stories was and how it differed from people's opinions who never lived it. It's been weird to experience people thinking they know my life better than I do. Have I made mistakes? Absolutely, and I'll continue to make them. But I always do my best to learn from those mistakes, just as I try to be honest with myself and the people listening to my story. I've been accused of exaggerating or lying my whole life, and I understand why. I'm too detailed, I'm too descriptive. The way my brain works when I experience a traumatic event, I become a completely different person. The whole universe literally slows down for me, and I'm able to see everything and remember most everything down to the minute details. There was a similar situation for me in the Marines when I was attacked by a Marine and his wife, and I was telling my story to my staff sergeant, and he called me a liar while everyone else absolutely loved the story, but I digress. I promise to give you my truth to the best of my ability, and if you don't buy it or don't like it, that's okay. As the title suggests, my wife got arrested for domestic violence against me. Just a disclaimer, if you're new to my stories, I'm a writer. Not in the sense that I'm a published author or anything, but I tell long stories. I'm sorry for that in advance if you decide to stay. So where to begin? I guess the best place to start is by saying that I'm doing okay. I'm not great, but I'm also not horrible. I've had a lot of ups and downs since the beginning of all this. I also need to anonymously give shout-outs to my friends and family who have supported me over the last year. I tell them every day, but I feel it needs to be said here. The overwhelming patience, love, understanding, and sympathy you all have given me has been tremendous. And I thank you, and to those Redditors who have voluntarily come along this journey with me and have reached out to tell me how my story has moved them and offered their condolences. I thank you as well. Okay, let's get started. My ex moved out of the house fairly quickly after the scandal, almost a month after I caught her, to be exact, and about 2 weeks after she was arrested. She moved back to the apartments that she moved out of to begin her life with me. I did help her move into her new place, mostly because I feared she'd have the guy she cheated with come to my house to help her move her belongings, and partly because I needed her out as quickly as possible so I could begin my healing process. I won't give many updates on how she's doing personally, as there really isn't a whole lot to say. Her life right now is no different than anyone else's life. She works constantly and pays for an overpriced place to live. For me, I kept the house that we were renting. My biggest fear was being able to afford the rent on a single income because she and I made fairly comparable money. But to my surprise, I was shocked that not only was I able to cover all my bills, but I had spending money to do things with, which was awesome and weird and uncomfortable because we had been so tight with money for so long. I've learned that part of it was because I no longer had her debts. Part of it was because I reorganized my debts, and the last part was because I've learned that she was bad at managing money. This next part is very important in my story, and I hope I help some of those who need it. I had been spending a lot of time with my therapist after the cheating. He was a relatively new therapist for me, and the first male therapist I ever had. As men, we're taught that society doesn't care about our feelings. I think Chris Rock said it best. Women, children, and wives, the only things loved unconditionally. Men are only loved on the condition that they provide. As a result, men have 3 times higher suicide rates. Not many people ask us how we're doing, and if we do share how we're actually doing, people don't care. That's why most of us just say, "I'm all right." That's why I decided to go with a male therapist. My therapist before him suggested I would do better with a male, and that made me feel so uncomfortable. I've always picked female therapists because I felt I could safely be vulnerable with them, but it never really did the trick for me. It almost felt like the female therapists, at least the ones I had, didn't know how to deal with a guy who was being that level of honest with their emotions. I learned that this opportunity with him forced me out of my comfort zone, and that's the only time we see real change in ourselves, when we step outside of that bubble. I was so fortunate because he was such a damn good therapist. Shortly after my breakdown story above, he saw me in person against COVID protocols and embraced me. I've never hugged a man before, other than a greeting. I don't even hug my own dad and didn't know how much I needed that level of compassion from someone. But here are some of the ups and downs I was mentioning, though. He retired shortly after, and I have yet to find a good replacement for him. I have a new therapist, a female that I adore. I think she's great, but she's booked out so far in advance that it just makes it hard to build that bond. I've spent a lot of money and time trying to create a peaceful environment around me and focus on self-care. Unfortunately, I spend an inordinate amount of time in my room, 8 hours of sleep, 8 hours for work, and I'm so exhausted of late to do anything that I'll stay in my room outside of work, hours to watch TV or play games on my computer. So I took an idea from TikTok and completely built clouds all over my ceiling, which is fairly large. It took me about a month of off and on work to complete. I'm not super handy or a do-it-yourself person, so I made some tiny mistakes, but honestly, I do love it. I bought Bluetooth LED lights and an essential oils diffuser with Bluetooth and a premium sound Amazon Echo and hooked them all up. I tell it to rain, and the LED lights mimic lightning. The speakers play thunder, which hits pretty hard with the premium sound, and I found some oil that smells like rain that the diffuser uses. I meditate. I found a channel on YouTube called Meditative Mind that is very relaxing and has gorgeous visuals. I'm also in the process of building a smart mirror. I'm tweaking it a bit and adding a touchscreen sensor to the frame of the mirror and adding Alexa with blue LED lights that trigger on the wake word. My goal was to try new things that I don't normally do, and I've been enjoying it. The kids and divorce. Moving on things with my kids are pretty good. My young boys are adjusting to the separation very well. They're both in daddy's boy phase and want to spend all their time with me, I'm sure, in a few months. They'll go back to being mama's boys. My daughter is doing okay. There were a lot of negative comments about her, and I'd like to ask that they not continue if at all possible. She was really put in an impossible situation, and no one here has walked in her shoes, not even me. She and I have both grown tremendously as father and daughter, and I'm so proud of her. We're both getting the help we need. She really is a great kid. As for the divorce, we both agreed to be amicable. As hard as it is for me not to try to absolutely bury her, that doesn't really serve our situation well. It doesn't serve our children well. The best thing for the kids is to have two successful parents, not two parents who hate each other and fight all the time. She and I don't really get along well, but I think it's safe to say that we're both trying. I'd argue that she still acts like a B word from time to time for absolutely no good reason, which makes things harder. We've had our ups and downs with the amicable divorce, though. We decided to split the costs 50-50, but she was getting to a point where she wasn't wanting to pay for a while. So that process took a while to get started. Once we started going to our mediator appointments and started paying, we moved right along. But then she got upset about some really stupid stuff and placed the entire thing on hold, threatening to take me to court because she didn't want to take the kids to Disneyland with tickets that I had purchased with an accident settlement I had while we were together. The kids, July heat in California, all the walking, two adults who don't get along. None of that sounded like it was going to be a good situation. So I went with the kids and my father. She was so upset that she wouldn't even talk about what her concerns were and just put the divorce on hold for months with no word. Once we finally got to talking again and agreed to move forward, our legal assistant abruptly died from a brain aneurysm. We got a new legal assistant who took over her caseload, and the divorce should be final any day now. The final paperwork was sent to the courts, and once we received the paperwork in the mail signed by the judge, then it's official. Dating, I had, against the advice of just about everyone, joined a dating app. I needed to have someone to talk to, someone to flirt with, and who knows, someone that actually enjoys my company. As you can probably guess, it hasn't gone well. I've only made it out of first date status once. I was still honest with these women that I was still married, going through a divorce, and it was pretty recent, and that was clearly red flags for them. I get it, but what they didn't get was that despite those issues, I'm still the same person they enjoyed talking to and agreed to meet up with. I guess they just felt they didn't want any of that potential drama, and that's fine. One thing I've been told by a couple of women that really hurt was that they fear they'd have to raise my kids if they were to get involved with me and have to deal with the baby mama drama. I've been a father for 17 years, and I've never once needed anyone to raise my children. That's when I met this woman. She had liked my profile first, and when I pulled up hers, she was absolutely freaking gorgeous. She was fit. She was a marathon runner. She was sweet, kind, everything. Facebook dating lets you know if you have mutual friends with a person, and we had 3. It turned out that we actually had the same childhood friends, and that made everything between her and me so easy. She asked our friends about me, and I did the same, and they all raved about us to the other. It was an instant connection. She knew all the perfect things to say to me, which made sense because she was a social worker. She did so in a way that I pulled all my walls down. And for the first time in my life, I felt so freaking special and cared for. She works at one of the hospitals I worked at, and after a few days of talking, she asked if I'd bring her coffee so we could meet, and I agreed. She paid for the coffee, I picked it up and brought it to her. We talked in my car for about 20 minutes, and then she asked if I wanted to kiss her. When I said she was gorgeous, I said yes. Things were going so well between us that we were planning trips together. She got accepted to run the Chicago Marathon, so we booked flights together and really enjoyed one another's company. Then something changed. Her father got sick with cancer again, and her whole personality changed. I could feel her pulling away a little bit at a time. One night, she and I were supposed to spend time together, but she never responded to my text. She said she took a nap on the couch, but I could tell there was something off, and I asked to speak to her on the phone. She said no. I asked if I could come over to see her, and she said no. She essentially broke up with me through text and refused to ever see me again. All of the stuff that I had left at her place is probably still there or in the trash. She wouldn't let me grab anything, and we haven't seen each other since. She decided, obviously, not to go to Chicago with me and asked if I'd switch her flight tickets to a different seat for her so she could go with one of her girlfriends. Hold times are like 1 to 2 hours long for airlines, so I told her I didn't feel comfortable doing that, but she should have the ability to make the changes no problem. Apparently that pissed her off, as she didn't say another word. I got an email later that day that some changes were made to the flight and haven't heard from her since. She had talked a lot about how bipolar her sister was and her dad's anger issues. As I reflect on it all, I wonder if she's bipolar and has anger issues. My job. So I've been going through all of this trauma from my soon-to-be ex-wife, the divorce being halted, the ex-girlfriend dogging me, and then I found out that I was being laid off of work in August. This was the third round of layoffs for my company, and I had felt that I was pretty safe because our team was the only team that was allowed to hire because we had so much work that needed to be done. For my particular job, I was the sole person providing support for 50,000 employees. But even I wasn't safe from the layoffs. They made me train my replacement and gave me a severance. This was a job that I loved in a company that I absolutely loved working for, but it was boring. There wasn't much work for me to do despite being the sole support for the whole system. As long as the system was working as it should, no support was ever needed. I was bored, but content and loyal. When they say some doors close so others can open, they mean it. I started looking for a new job and landed one at a phenomenal company. That's literally a golden ticket on my resume. I doubled my salary and have been able to truly work on my self-care. I bought a new bicycle for trail rides and just bought a 2021 Subaru WRX STI, my dream car. I've been doing volunteer work and other efforts to try new things. I signed up my oldest son earlier this year to play t-ball, and I coached his team. I absolutely love baseball, and I was quite the stud as a young man playing, so I was excited to coach for my first time. I absolutely loved it, and I got such a great reception from the kids and their parents. I signed up again for next year, and my youngest son will be playing for his first year. When I say he's excited, I mean he's super excited. He even busts open the door when I'm going to the bathroom to ask me if I'll coach him next year. One of the moms even asked me out, although I didn't really feel a connection. Treatment. One of the things my therapist suggested before he retired was a program called Spravato esketamine, which is essentially microdose ketamine. It's typically used for people who have been resistant to antidepressants. My experience has been life-changing, and I highly recommend it to anyone who is interested. You do hallucinate with your eyes closed. I learned that if you listen to music by carbon-based life forms or similar music and have haptic feedback headphones for vibrations, I got the Razer Nari, you can literally elevate your experience. Despite my struggles, I feel so much better than where I was. I really think it saved my life. I'm calmer, more level-headed, happier, and focused. You can go to Spravato's website to look for local offices that offer this treatment. They typically want you to have tried 3 different kinds of antidepressants before they try you on this. You can lie to them and say 3 types you've taken. Mindbloom is a website where you can get it sent to your house. I recommend the office route over the website route if your insurance will cover it. It'll be cheaper. Other activities. As you can tell, I do enjoy writing. I'm currently working on about 11 books and short stories and 1 article about mental health. They're all a part of the same universe I created, except the article and short story, and mostly they're graphic novels and children's books. Sci-fi, 5 books, children's books, 3 books, comedy, 1 book, horror, 1 book, short story, 1, article, 1, summary, 1. So to summarize, I'm still hurting a lot, but I could be a lot worse. I'm convinced that I'm going to be alone forever, partly because it's impossibly hard for a single dad with young kids to find a woman who wants to implant herself in a large family, and partly because I'm such a broken mess. but I can't commit to anyone. And my depression is so bad that my weight is getting really bad as a result. I did make an appointment with a doctor. I think it will help with my weight issues and exhaustion. I've been experiencing, I lost my job but landed an even better one. My divorce should be final any day now. This process is absolutely not something you overcome in a short period of time. I was going through divorce care meetings, and one of the meetings they said felt so profound. When you are single, you're whole, your spirit is whole, then you meet someone and fall in love. You start a family with them, and your two souls merge into a one larger soul. But when you go through a divorce, especially a traumatic one, your soul is literally ripped in half, and it takes a while for you to become whole again while alone. That was the best summary I've heard to explain divorce and the pain. Side note, while on a dating app, I found my ex-wife and almost swiped right on accident. My best friend is also going through a divorce. I almost swiped right on his wife. Pro tip: swipes lower. I can't deny that these past days have been some of the hardest of my life. Every morning I wake up feeling like a different person, someone unrecognizable. My heart and soul feel like they've fallen into a deep abyss, one with no light, no hope. Everything I once cherished, everything I thought was solid, is now shattered like the pieces of a broken glass. The betrayal from Rachel, the coldness from Emily, everything has hit me like a tidal wave, leaving me drowning in emotions I can't escape from. The painful conversations, the cold stares, they all make it hard for me to recognize myself. I used to think I could handle it all. I thought I was strong enough to protect my family, strong enough to face every challenge, but now, standing in front of the harsh truth, I realize that no matter how hard I try, sometimes I can't hold everything together. I couldn't save my marriage. I couldn't change the betrayal from my wife. The feeling of failure weighed down on me, almost making me crumble. I can't forget the haunting images in my mind. My wife, the woman I trusted with everything, seeking someone else. The feeling of seeing Emily so cold, facing the indifference and lack of emotion from her, it felt like a slap in the face. My heart was heavy, and it felt like I lost everything. But then something in me woke up. Even though I was in so much pain, even though it felt like I couldn't go on, I knew that if I kept letting this pain consume me, I'd never be able to move forward. My daughter Sophia, my children, and I, we couldn't keep living in this darkness. No matter how difficult it seemed, I decided I had to step out of it. I had to set an example for my daughter, for myself. I couldn't let the mistakes and betrayals drag me down any longer. I couldn't live forever complaining about the past. Life isn't always fair, and sometimes we face challenges we never imagined. But I also realized that nothing can defeat someone who is determined to change. The first step for me was accepting the truth, even though it was painful. I started seeking help from family, friends, and people I trusted. The conversations full of tears, the therapy sessions, and the moments of being alone made me realize one important thing. I had to love myself first. I couldn't keep living for the things that were gone, for the people who hurt me. I had to focus on rebuilding my life because I deserved better. The journey wasn't easy. It took me a long time to heal, to understand that finding myself again wasn't something that would happen overnight. The wounds in my soul wouldn't heal quickly, but I started stepping out of my shadow. I started loving my daughter more, spending time with her and building a better relationship. I realized that there is still so much good ahead. And then I found myself again, even without Rachel by my side, even with everything I believed in falling apart. I knew that I could keep going. I could keep loving, and most importantly, I could be free. I didn't have to live in a fake relationship anymore. I didn't have to live under the shadow of betrayals. I told myself that life is a journey, and I had just begun to walk my own path. Sometimes I still feel the pain, but I don't let it control me anymore. I know that I'm stronger than I think, and no matter what happens, I will keep moving forward. Things may have changed, but I won't let them change me. Each day is a new opportunity to start over, and I won't waste any opportunity to live a meaningful life. My journey has only just begun, and I'm ready to face whatever comes next. In the end, I truly believe that after the storm, the sun will shine again. The story we've just shared together is a powerful reminder of a crucial life lesson. Sometimes it is through pain and betrayal that we discover our true strength. In life, nothing lasts forever, and sometimes we have to face painful truths that we cannot change. But instead of letting those truths crush us, we have the ability to rise, overcome, and keep moving forward. To me, this story isn't just about betrayal in marriage, but about resilience. We, as ordinary people, can face challenges that seem insurmountable. When everything falls apart, when nothing goes the way we expect, it feels like we lose everything. But in those darkest moments, we often discover an extraordinary strength within us that we never knew existed. Like John in the story, when he was betrayed, he thought he couldn't go on. He thought his life was over and everything he had worked for had been destroyed. But in reality, that moment was the beginning of a new journey. It was a journey of learning to love himself again, of rediscovering hope in life, and most importantly, finding the strength to keep going. The lesson here is this: never give up. No matter how difficult life gets, no matter how much we are hurt or betrayed, we can always rise and continue living. The truth is, it's only when we let go of the past, only when we face our pain, that we can see the new opportunities and paths opening before us. No one can take away our belief in ourselves unless we allow it to happen. John didn't give up. He kept moving forward, even though the road was challenging and difficult. He found joy in life again, spent time with his daughter, and most importantly, he learned to love himself again. He realized that in life, change is inevitable, but the most important thing is how we face and overcome it. So the big lesson we can take from this story is, no matter how difficult life may seem, always trust in your ability to overcome. Love yourself and never give up. After the storm, the sun will shine again. And in our darkest moments, that's when we find the wisdom to change, to renew our lives. That is the only way forward, and we deserve to walk that path. Life rarely goes as we expect. We build our dreams, make our plans, and hope that everything will unfold just as we imagine. But sometimes the greatest challenges come from the very relationships we hold dear. Relationships that we think are invulnerable. In those moments when trust is broken, when love is betrayed, it feels like the very foundation beneath us is crumbling. It's in these heart-wrenching times that we are faced with a choice: to let the weight of the pain crush us or to rise from the ruins and move forward, no matter how broken we feel. It's not easy, and it often feels like we're lost in the chaos of our emotions, but it's only by facing the truth, however painful it may be, and accepting that pain as part of our healing process, that we can truly begin to find the light at the end of the tunnel. The journey is long and uncertain, but it is the only path that leads to peace and a renewed sense of self. The story of John in this video is a powerful reminder of this harsh truth. Despite everything falling apart around him, his marriage, his family, his sense of trust, he was able to find the strength to take control of his life again. His journey, though filled with grief, anger, and deep emotional wounds, shows that even when life pushes us into a corner, there's always a way to rebuild, to heal, and to reclaim happiness. John didn't let his darkest moments define him. Instead, he used them as a foundation to grow stronger, to become a better father, and to find his own path forward. But what about you? What challenges are you facing right now? Whatever you are going through, it's important to remember this one thing: you must never give up. You deserve happiness and peace, but you can only find it when you're brave enough to step out of the shadows of your past. Whether you're healing from a broken relationship, dealing with the loss of a loved one, or struggling to overcome a personal obstacle, know that you have the power within you to create a better future. Don't let the past hold you back. You are capable of so much more than you realize. If John's story has touched you, inspired you, or given you hope, we encourage you to continue this journey with us. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss out on any of the uplifting, inspiring, and real stories we have to share. We're here to support each other, to remind each other that no matter how hard life gets, there is always a way forward. Thank you for being a part of this community, and we'll see you in the next video. Always remember, after the storm, the sun will shine again, and brighter than before.